On my birthday, my family threw me a party just to demand $130,000. When I said no, things got worse and my name is Sophia, and in 3 weeks I'll be celebrating my 33rd birthday here in Seattle. I've been living in this tiny apartment downtown for almost 8 years, constantly promising myself that I'll move soon. It's small, overpriced, and cramped, but I've stuck it out because it allowed me to save a good chunk of money. Every paycheck I've earned from my job as a content strategist has been carefully split, part for expenses, part tucked away in savings. Now, finally, after all these years, I've managed to save about $210,000 toward my dream house. I've spent countless evenings scrolling through real estate listings, picturing myself in a cozy home with a small garden outside the city. Some weekends I attend open houses, wandering through rooms imagining where I'll put my furniture. It's become an obsession, something that keeps me going when things feel frustrating or monotonous at work. But my family situation has always been complicated, which is probably why this dream house feels like such an important goal. My older brother Jackson, who's 35, has always been the star of our family. He got married to Chloe pretty young, and they have 2 kids, Mia, who's 7, and Aiden, now 5. Jackson owns a small tech startup, and my parents, Evelyn and Benjamin, never failed to praise his entrepreneurial spirit. Even though, privately, I've always suspected things aren't going as well as Jackson likes to claim. Growing up, my parents seemed constantly focused on Jackson's ambitions, his achievements, and later, his family. My accomplishments felt invisible by comparison, overshadowed by the endless praise heaped onto Jackson for even the smallest success. It got to the point where I began accepting their lack of interest as normal, learning not to expect much attention from them. For my birthday this year, I planned something small but meaningful. My closest friends, Grace, Lily, and Harper, agreed we'd celebrate at a trendy new restaurant downtown. I'd even made reservations weeks in advance, excited to enjoy a fun evening away from work stress and family drama. Everything was perfectly lined up until my phone rang unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. I glanced down, puzzled to see my mother's name on the screen, since Evelyn rarely calls without a specific reason. "Hi, Sophia dear," she started cheerfully, immediately setting off alarm bells in my mind because this tone was very unlike her usual brisk manner. "Hey Mom," I replied cautiously, already anticipating that there had to be a catch hidden behind her sudden warmth. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Oh yes, everything's wonderful," Evelyn said quickly. "Your father and I were thinking it would be lovely to celebrate your birthday here at home this year. We'd like to host dinner, just the family, to make it special for you." For a moment, I couldn't even respond, partly because they had entirely forgotten my birthday last year. I'd spent the evening alone, scrolling through birthday wishes from Facebook acquaintances who barely knew me, until Grace and Lily surprised me with pizza and wine. Now suddenly my parents wanted to celebrate me, and it didn't sit right. I hesitated, unsure how to react, fighting the small part of me that desperately wanted their approval. "I've already planned something with my friends," I finally said gently, testing her reaction. "We have reservations downtown." "Oh, but Sophia," Evelyn pleaded softly, "Jackson and Chloe will be here, and the children are excited to see their Aunt Sophia. Please reconsider. It would mean so much to your father and me if you came." There was something in her voice, a rare vulnerability, maybe, that made me feel guilty for hesitating. Deep down, despite years of neglect, I still longed for their recognition. It was embarrassing to admit, even to myself, that their attention mattered after all this time. "All right," I finally agreed reluctantly, ignoring the anxious twist in my stomach. "I'll come over. I'll talk to my friends and reschedule." When I called Grace afterward, she was immediately skeptical, her voice tense with disbelief. "Sophia, are you sure about this?" Grace asked urgently. "I mean, you remember last year, right? When have they ever prioritized you?" I sighed heavily, feeling conflicted, torn between hope and reality. "Maybe they're trying to change, Grace. Just once, I want to believe that things might actually be different this time." "Okay," she relented hesitantly. "But just promise you'll call me if it goes sideways. I'll be ready with emergency wine." In the days leading up to my birthday, anxiety slowly began to outweigh my hope. I chose a blue dress I'd once worn at a work event, remembering that Chloe had complimented it in passing. The afternoon of my birthday, I bought an elegant chocolate mousse cake from a bakery downtown, spending nearly $100. It was extravagant, but part of me wanted to prove to them that I was successful enough to buy something special. Driving to my parents' modest suburban home that evening, I felt a mix of nerves and cautious excitement. Jackson's car was already parked in the driveway, along with Chloe's familiar SUV. I gathered the cake box from the passenger seat, feeling strangely emotional as I approached the front door. Before I could knock, my mother opened it, smiling broadly, almost artificially. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Evelyn said warmly, guiding me inside. I stood frozen in the entryway, shocked by what I saw next. Bright balloons and streamers filled the living room, and a large glittery banner hung proudly above the fireplace. "Happy 33rd birthday, Sophia." In my entire life, I had never seen anything like this prepared for me. "Do you like it?" my mother asked anxiously, watching my reaction carefully. "It's beautiful, Mom," I managed to say quietly, feeling a tightness in my throat. My father stepped forward, patting me on the shoulder awkwardly but warmly, leading me to a table set with our best family china. Jackson gave me a hug, smiling brightly. "Happy birthday, sis. Glad you made it." I placed the expensive cake onto the counter carefully, still overwhelmed by the unexpected effort my family had made. As we sat down for dinner, the aromas of childhood favorites filled the room: roasted chicken, scalloped potatoes, fresh rolls. For the first time in years, my father engaged me in conversation, asking about my job and actually listening attentively to my responses. Jackson told jokes, Chloe laughed genuinely, and the kids enthusiastically shared stories from school. Yet, as my mother began recalling memories from my childhood, my happiness shifted sharply toward confusion. Each story she recounted with affection actually belonged to Jackson: moments from his life, accomplishments he'd achieved, mistakes he'd made. It was clear, unmistakable, yet no one seemed to realize the error. I sat there quietly, nodding along with a forced smile, allowing them to rewrite my history without protest. Something didn't feel right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this carefully prepared dinner was leading to something much darker. When dinner ended, we moved into the living room where Mia and Aiden rushed off to play upstairs. Chloe quietly cleared away the dishes, while Jackson lounged comfortably on the sofa, smiling warmly at me. Evelyn gently sat next to my father, Benjamin, who was now watching me intently, as though waiting for some cue. I felt my heart quicken slightly as Evelyn broke the brief silence by clapping her hands together, smiling brightly. "Well, Sophia," she said in a voice far too cheerful for comfort, "I think it's time for your birthday present." My stomach tightened with unease, but I forced a polite smile, nodding in expectation. Benjamin stood, reaching for something hidden behind his armchair, a medium-sized box wrapped in glossy silver paper. He approached me slowly, carefully handing me the package, watching closely as I accepted it. My heart raced slightly as I noticed Evelyn and Jackson exchanging a glance, their expressions strangely eager and tense. I unwrapped the gift carefully, deliberately, hoping my apprehension wasn't noticeable in my trembling fingers. Beneath the shiny paper was a plain white box, neatly sealed, unremarkable in every way. I opened it slowly, cautiously, a thousand conflicting emotions swirling inside me as I peered inside. At first, confusion replaced anxiety, because all I found was a single folded sheet of paper resting inside the empty box. My fingers shook slightly as I unfolded the document, eyes scanning the contents quickly, my confusion rapidly morphing into shock. In bold red numbers across the top, it showed a debt totaling $130,000, and beneath it, unmistakably printed in bold type, was Jackson's name. I stared at it blankly, disbelief quickly overtaking me, my throat tightening as I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. "What is this?" I asked quietly, finally looking up at them, voice barely more than a whisper. The silence stretched awkwardly before Evelyn answered, her voice calm yet authoritative, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Sophia, we wanted to celebrate you properly tonight," she began with forced sincerity. "But we also wanted you to understand the importance of family. Now we need you to help Jackson." I felt my pulse accelerate wildly, a surge of anger quickly rising, choking me as Benjamin nodded solemnly in agreement with Evelyn. "Jackson's startup isn't doing well, Sophia," my father explained evenly, as though reciting a practice speech. "He owes the bank a great deal of money. You have enough savings to cover this, and family always helps family." I almost laughed then, the absurdity of his statement striking me like a slap across the face. Instead, my voice came out strained, trembling from suppressed emotion as I responded sharply. "You're not serious," I challenged, desperately hoping this was some bizarre joke. "That money is everything I've saved to buy my own house, my future." Jackson leaned forward abruptly, his normally easygoing expression now replaced by a cold determination that startled me. "Sophia," he said sharply, "I have kids to support, a family relying on me. You're single, you don't have children. You can afford this. It's not a big sacrifice for you." Each word felt like a blow, causing my heart to pound painfully against my chest. I stared at him, stunned, feeling betrayed and isolated in my own childhood home. Jackson, the golden child, was demanding my entire future as casually as someone might borrow a spare jacket. "Jackson, that money isn't disposable," I argued, voice rising slightly despite my effort to remain calm. "I've spent years building those savings, sacrificing every luxury to secure my dream." Evelyn spoke again, her voice icy, almost cutting through me with each carefully chosen word. "Dreams can wait, Sophia," she said sternly, meeting my gaze directly. "Your brother's needs are more urgent. We must support him." Suddenly, the carefully prepared decorations, the elaborate dinner, the nostalgic stories, all made sense. My parents had created an illusion, manipulating my emotions, preparing me for this moment, knowing full well they would demand my life savings. "No," I stated firmly, the word escaping me in a rush of anger and defiance. "I'm not paying this debt. I refuse to throw away everything I've earned for Jackson's mistakes." The room went cold, silence thickening the air, making breathing difficult as my family stared at me, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed anger. Jackson rose abruptly, face reddening, pacing restlessly as if trying to contain his temper. "You've always been selfish, Sophia," Jackson spat bitterly, refusing to look directly at me now. "This isn't surprising. You'd rather hoard your money than save your own family." I stood too, shaking from anger and betrayal, feeling utterly cornered yet fiercely determined not to yield. "Selfish," I snapped sharply, confronting him openly for the first time in years. "You're the one demanding I give you my entire savings without hesitation, without remorse." Benjamin's voice broke through our argument, loud and authoritative, angry frustration spilling from every syllable. "If you refuse," my father threatened coldly, glaring at me with open hostility, "then you are no longer part of this family. Do you understand that clearly, Sophia?" The finality of his ultimatum shocked me into silence momentarily. But anger surged again, stronger than fear, stronger than grief, giving me the courage to reply with determination. "Fine," I said defiantly, meeting his glare unflinchingly. "If my only worth to you is financial, I have nothing left to lose by walking away." I turned sharply toward the front door, my emotions swirling painfully, threatening to overwhelm me completely as tears blurred my vision. As I reached for the handle, something hit me forcefully, splattering coldly across my ankles and shoes. Stunned, I glanced downward, recognizing with fury the remains of the expensive chocolate mousse cake I'd brought. Turning back, I saw Jackson standing smugly near the dining table, hands empty, wearing a bitter, spiteful smile. "Oops," he mocked lightly, his tone filled with cruel satisfaction. I didn't dignify his action with a response, instead storming outside quickly, feeling humiliated yet strangely liberated as I reached my car. I drove home shaking, emotions shifting wildly between rage, grief, and disbelief, unable to comprehend the depth of their betrayal. It wasn't until I entered my tiny apartment, locked the door behind me, and sank down onto the sofa that tears finally overtook me completely. I sobbed uncontrollably, the pain overwhelming me, mourning not just my lost birthday, but the shattered illusion of a family that had finally shown their true colors. The morning after that nightmare of a birthday, I woke up feeling hollow and exhausted, unable to shake the weight crushing my chest. My phone buzzed incessantly, but I ignored every call and message, needing time to breathe and think clearly. Eventually, I summoned the courage to call Grace, hoping her steady voice could anchor me in the storm of emotions swirling inside. She answered immediately, concern evident in her tone as I spilled everything. The fake party, the dead invoice, the cake thrown at my feet. Grace listened patiently, then her voice hardened with resolve. "Sophia, those people aren't your family. They're manipulators. You don't owe them a thing." Her words felt like a lifeline, pulling me out of despair and reminding me I wasn't alone. Soon after, Grace texted Lily and Harper, and within an hour, all three friends gathered at my apartment, bringing wine and comfort, ready to back me up however I needed. As I recounted the whole ordeal, The shock and anger on their faces fueled my own determination not to let my family's toxic demands define me. They told me I deserved better, that my dreams of a home were worth protecting from such selfishness. Encouraged by their support, I made a decision. I was going to take control of my life and prove I didn't need to sacrifice my future for people who saw me only as a wallet. For the next 2 weeks, my phone was a battlefield. Messages from Evelyn and Benjamin ranged from desperate pleas to harsh accusations, while Jackson's texts were laced with bitterness and thinly veiled threats. "You're destroying everything," one message read. Another claimed, "Your selfishness will ruin your brother's family." I deleted every single one without replying, refusing to engage with their emotional blackmail. Despite the turmoil, I found solace in focusing on my goal. I contacted Rebecca, a trusted realtor friend, and told her I was ready to buy. The timing was perfect because a charming 2-bedroom bungalow had just hit the market near the outskirts of Seattle, exactly the kind of place I'd dreamed about for years. Rebecca took me to see it that afternoon, and the moment I stepped inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The kitchen was updated with gleaming counters, the living room had a cozy fireplace, and the backyard was filled with fruit trees that promised future afternoons of quiet joy. I pictured myself hosting friends here, planting a garden, and finally building the life I'd worked so hard to save for. There was no hesitation. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers, officially becoming a homeowner. When I held the keys for the first time, tears came again. But these were different. Tears of relief, pride, and hope. I posted photos on Instagram and Facebook, sharing glimpses of the living room, kitchen, and lush backyard. The caption read simply, "New home, new chapter. Finally a homeowner." The outpouring of support was immediate and heartwarming, friends celebrating this milestone with genuine joy. But the peace didn't last long. Almost immediately, comments began appearing from family members who'd been excluded from the celebration. My mother's message accused me of selfishness for buying a house, while Jackson supposedly faced homelessness. Jackson's post painted me as cold and uncaring, blaming me for tearing apart the family with my refusal to help. Lisa, Jackson's wife, joined in too, accusing me of cruelty in front of their children, using words that stung deeper than I expected. Relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly commented with judgment and hostility, demanding explanations and questioning my character. The narrative they spun made me look like the villain, but they carefully omitted the truth behind my decisions. Frustrated and hurt, I decided to fight back with honesty. I made another post, laying out the full story as clearly and calmly as possible. I explained how my parents had ignored my birthdays for years before orchestrating a fake celebration that ended with a demand for $130,000 to cover Jackson's debts. I shared screenshots of the threatening texts I'd received, exposing the emotional abuse and financial manipulation. The response was overwhelming and immediate. Friends, distant relatives, and even acquaintances expressed outrage and disbelief at my family's behavior. Aunt Carol commented, calling out my parents for their cruelty, and Uncle Tom wrote that what they did was unacceptable. Even Mike, a cousin usually silent in family disputes, publicly declared his support for me, calling out the toxic dynamics that had plagued us for years. The backlash forced my parents and Jackson into silence online, their attempts to vilify me falling flat as more people sided with my version of events. For 4 months, peace finally settled over my life. I hosted a small housewarming party with friends and a few supportive relatives, basking in the calm and happiness that came from making my own family of choice. But that calm was shattered one Saturday morning when an unexpected knock at my door sent my heart racing with confusion and dread. Through the peephole, I saw Jackson, Chloe, Mia, Aiden, and my parents standing on my porch, luggage in hand. Their presence was uninvited, and their faces were marked with exhaustion and desperation. Opening the door slowly, I asked quietly, "What are you doing here?" Chloe brushed past me, already inspecting the living room as if she owned the place. Jackson dragged their suitcases inside without hesitation, explaining matter-of-factly that the bank had seized their apartment. They had nowhere else to go and intended to stay with me until they could get back on their feet. I felt a mix of shock and anger flooding through me as I watched them make themselves at home. Lisa disappeared upstairs to check bedrooms for the kids, while Jackson rearranged my furniture and my parents discussed making the space more family-friendly. My protests fell on deaf ears as chaos began to consume my carefully built sanctuary. With no other options, I called the police and explained the situation. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived, listening patiently before telling them to leave since this was my property, and they had no legal right to stay. The family's protestations were met with firm reminders. This was my house, and I had the right to refuse their presence. It took 20 tense minutes for them to gather their belongings and exit, but as they walked to their cars, Evelyn turned back, screaming venomously, "You're a traitor, Sophia. A traitor to your own family." I stood at the door, feeling a complicated mixture of relief, sorrow, and exhaustion. I locked the door behind them and called a security company immediately, arranging for an alarm system and cameras to protect my home from future intrusions. 2 weeks later, I heard from Mike that Jackson and his family were now living with my parents in a cramped apartment, miserable and bitter. He told me about a recent family barbecue where Jackson loudly blamed me for ruining his life, only to be shut down by Uncle Tom and others tired of his self-pity and excuses. Meanwhile, Lisa's own parents had apparently cut her off after witnessing the toxicity and manipulation that had driven our family apart. It was clear no one was taking their side anymore. As for me, I was thriving. My house felt like a true home filled with warmth, laughter, and peace. I painted the guest room, started a vegetable garden, and entertained friends with dinners and game nights. I haven't spoken to my parents or Jackson since that humiliating day, and I have no plans to reconcile. They revealed their true selves in the worst way possible, and I refuse to pretend otherwise. For the first time in years, I feel free, happy, and whole. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting them out or if I miss the family I once wished for. The answer is always the same: no. True family supports, uplifts, and respects you, not demands your entire future while calling you selfish when you say no. Months passed after the eviction, and life began to settle into a peaceful rhythm I had never known before. My mornings started with quiet coffee on the porch, the air fresh with the scent of pine and earth from my small garden. I found comfort in simple routines, watering the plants, reading books, and cooking meals for myself without the noise of conflict or expectation. Each day was a step further away from the chaos my family had dragged me through, and closer to the life I had always dreamed of building. The support from friends continued to be a balm for my bruised heart, and their presence reminded me that chosen family can often be stronger than blood ties. Grace, Lily, and Harper became pillars of my world, always ready with laughter, advice, or simply a listening ear when I needed to talk. With them, I felt seen and valued, not for what I could provide, but simply for who I was. This newfound happiness fueled my determination to protect my peace and keep toxic people firmly outside my life. Then, one rainy evening, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was Chloe. The message was brief but urgent. "Can we talk? I need your help." My heart raced with confusion and hesitation. Despite everything, I had always believed there was more to her story than what I had seen during those tense family moments. I debated for hours, wondering if reaching out could bring clarity or just more pain. Eventually, my curiosity and cautious hope won, and I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. When Chloe arrived, her usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. She looked tired and worn, eyes shadowed with sleepless nights and worry. We ordered tea, and after a long silence, she began to speak, slowly, hesitantly, unraveling a story I never expected. Jackson's startup had collapsed months before that terrible birthday night. The debt was far greater than the family let on, and it wasn't just business losses. It was gambling, secret debts that Jackson hid from everyone. Chloe admitted that Jackson had manipulated the entire family, twisting the truth and using everyone's guilt to pressure me into paying off his mess. She confessed that she had been trapped in the chaos, unable to break free while trying to protect the children. Her voice cracked as she described nights filled with arguments, broken promises, and Jackson's growing dependence on unhealthy habits. It was a side of the story I had never heard, a reality hidden beneath layers of pride and denial. Listening to Chloe, I felt a mixture of sorrow and anger, not just for myself, but for her and the kids caught in this toxic web. She apologized for the pain I'd endured and for the times she had sided with Jackson without question. We talked for hours, sharing wounds and hopes, realizing that despite the past, we both wanted something better. By the time we parted, an unexpected alliance had formed between us, born from shared pain and the desire for healing. In the following weeks, Chloe and I became unlikely allies. We exchanged texts and phone calls, coordinating plans for her and the children's safety and well-being. She moved out of Jackson's house and stayed temporarily with a friend, while I offered support however I could without overstepping. Our relationship grew from cautious cooperation into genuine friendship, a lifeline for both of us. It was a healing balm neither of us had anticipated, proving that family isn't always who you're born to, but who stands by you when it matters most. Then, just as I began to feel a fragile sense of stability returning, Jackson reappeared. He showed up at my doorstep late one night, disheveled and desperate, pleading for forgiveness and reconciliation. His eyes were wild, haunted by guilt and addiction, but also by a stubborn refusal to accept responsibility. He promised he had changed, that he wanted to make things right, and that Chloe and the children needed us to be a family again. Chloe stood beside me, calm but resolute, her arms crossed as she faced him without fear. We listened to his pleas, but neither of us was willing to let him back into our lives so easily. We had seen the damage he caused, the lies, and the manipulation, and we knew that forgiving him would not be simple or immediate. When Jackson's frustration boiled over into threats, Chloe didn't hesitate to call the police herself, a moment that marked her reclaiming power and setting boundaries. The officers arrived quickly, and Jackson was escorted away under their watchful eyes, left standing alone in the cold night. Watching him go, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow, but mostly hope, for myself, for Chloe, and for the children who deserved a future free from fear. It was the end of a toxic chapter, but also the beginning of something new and uncertain, yet full of promise. Over the next months, Chloe, the kids, and I built a new life together, far from the shadows of the past. We celebrated small victories: Mia's first soccer goal, Aiden's first day at school, quiet evenings spent cooking meals and sharing stories. Our home became a sanctuary, a place where love and respect were the foundation rather than control and demands. In the quiet moments, I often thought about how strange and beautiful life could be, how a broken family could fracture but also remake itself in unexpected ways. Sometimes, I catch myself smiling genuinely, without the weight of guilt or worry pressing down. For the first time in years, I feel free to be me, whole, hopeful, and surrounded by people who truly care. It isn't the life I imagined as a child, but it's better than I ever dared to dream. I've learned that true family is chosen, built on trust, support, and kindness, and that sometimes, letting go is the most powerful act of love we can offer ourselves. Just when I thought I had finally escaped the chaos and found a new sense of peace, life threw me an unexpected curveball that no one saw coming. One chilly autumn evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I heard a soft knock on my front door that sent a jolt of nervous energy through me. I wasn't expecting visitors, especially not after everything that had happened, so I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole before unlocking the door. Standing there was Chloe, but this time, she wasn't alone. Her eyes looked tired, rimmed with exhaustion, and the kids clung tightly to her sides. But the most shocking part was the absence of Jackson. Instead, Chloe came to me with a vulnerability I hadn't seen before, and she asked if she and the children could stay for a while, explaining that their situation had become far worse than anyone realized. Jackson's addiction had spiraled completely out of control after we'd cut him out, and now, with no support left, Chloe had made the difficult decision to leave him, for good. Listening to her, I felt a deep mix of sympathy and caution. I had learned through painful experience that trust didn't come easily, but something about Chloe's honesty and courage sparked a willingness in me to help. We agreed that this temporary refuge would be just the beginning of a fresh start, one built on honesty and mutual respect rather than control and manipulation. It was strange and beautiful how someone I once viewed as part of the problem could become a crucial ally in my own healing. As the weeks passed, Chloe and I forged a bond neither of us expected, filled with late-night conversations about parenting, dreams, and reclaiming our lives. The kids blossomed in the safe space we created, their laughter filling the rooms that had once echoed with tension and silence. In those moments, I saw the true meaning of family, not blood alone, but chosen connections that nurture and protect. It was a new kind of peace, fragile yet fiercely precious. Then, without warning, Jackson reappeared in my life. He showed up one rainy night, drenched and desperate, pounding on my door with a voice full of regret and demands for forgiveness. His eyes were wild, haunted by addiction's grip, yet pleading for a chance to rebuild what he had destroyed. Chloe stood beside me silently, her posture firm, eyes steady as she listened to his frantic promises to change and mend their broken family. Despite the years of pain and manipulation, a part of me wanted to believe him, that maybe, just maybe, this time things could be different. But the memories of betrayal were sharp and clear, and I refused to be drawn into the destructive cycle again. When Jackson's frustration turned to anger, threatening everything we had rebuilt, Chloe didn't hesitate for a second. She reached for her phone and called the police herself, asserting the boundaries we both knew were necessary. The officers arrived swiftly, their presence calm yet firm as they escorted Jackson away into the cold night. Watching him leave, defeated and alone, was a moment charged with sorrow but also relief, a symbolic end to a toxic chapter. Chloe and I exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. We were no longer victims, but survivors, ready to face the future on our own terms. In the months that followed, the three of us, Chloe, the kids, and I, crafted a new life full of small triumphs and quiet joys. We celebrated birthdays, school milestones, and the ordinary beauty of everyday moments that once seemed impossible. Our home became a sanctuary where love and respect were the foundation, not manipulation and control. With every laugh shared and every tear wiped away, we healed pieces of ourselves that had long been broken. Sometimes, when the house falls silent and the kids are asleep, I sit on the porch and reflect on the journey. The pain, the betrayal, the unexpected friendships, and the resilience that brought me here. Life has taught me that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's the people who stand beside you when the world turns against you, who help you rebuild when everything falls apart. That lesson has become the core of who I am. I've finally learned to let go of the past without bitterness and to embrace the future without fear. The freedom to live authentically, surrounded by people who truly care, has given me a joy I never imagined possible. And while the scars remain, they remind me of how far I've come and how strong I really am. So here I am now, not the same person who once desperately sought approval from a family that never truly wanted me. Instead, I am a woman who has reclaimed her life, built new connections on trust and love, and discovered that sometimes the family you choose is the family that saves you.